Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all having a splendid day so far. I don't know about y'all, but this is the first week it's felt like truly summer vibes. The flowers are blooming. The apple tree out back is starting to sprout, or whatever you call it. Oh, and the bird feeder I set up has been loaded with chickadees, robins, and cardinals. I learned this week from one of my coworkers that apparently seeing a cardinal means somebody who has passed away is coming to visit you. I don't know if I want to believe that. Anyways, it's beautiful out, and in honor of such a beautiful week, I want to take you back to my non German roots and uncover some truly shocking horrors. Today, I bring you the story of Joachim Kroll, Germany's most sadistic killer. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from an All That's Interesting article, Wikipedia, and the rest I'll put down below, I promise. Our story today takes place in West Germany during the 50s, 60s, and 1970s. And during this era, murder was running rampant. I was curious myself, so I researched German serial killers by the years. And according to Wikipedia, there were at least 15 other known and documented serial killers active in Germany during these 3 decades. Suffice to say, there was no shortage of suspects. According to All That's Interesting, Kroll was born in 1933 during the beginning of the Nazi Party's rise in Germany. The youngest of 8 children, Kroll was considered weak, and this constant degradation from his family and community, coupled with an unstable upbringing during World War II, likely contributed to his crimes as an adult. Kroll was a frequent bedwetter as a child, which caused him, again, more humiliation. He also reportedly sexually abused animals. Both bedwetting and animal cruelty, as we know, are components of the McDonald Triad, a set of childhood behaviors that can point to violent tendencies later in life. Like many other families in Germany during World War II, Kroll's family suffered from extreme poverty and hunger, and the 8 kids didn't help. His father, a soldier in the German army, was taken as a prisoner of war by the Russian army and is believed to have died during the war, leaving Kroll and his 7 siblings alone with their mother. Kroll quit school in 1948 after having to repeat several grades more than once. At 15 years old, with a 4th grade education, his struggles in school were compounded by the fact and the disruptions of World War II. Later in life, testing revealed that he had an IQ of 78, and some reports claim Kroll didn't even know how to read. After leaving school, he started working as a farmhand and soon developed his appetite for murder. His first kill happened at the young age of 22 on February 8th of 1955. That day, Kroll had traveled to a nearby village by the name of Wallstead and happened across a 19-year-old girl by the name of Irmgard Strell. After stalking her for a bit, he cornered her alone, strangled her, raped her, and then slashed her stomach open. He would later claim that this first murder had eased his tendencies for violence, not committing another treacherous act for 4 years. However, police believe that he may have been involved in several more murders before 1959. Yeah, if I have a tendency to, let's say, eat McDonald's or poop after I shower, I'm not going to wait 4 years in between little joyous moments. Quote, his next known murder took place on June 16th of 1959, when 24-year-old Clara Frieda Tesmer was killed in Rhine. Tesmer's murder was almost identical to Irmgard Strell's, only this time, Kroll began to engage in what would become his trademark cannibalism. Kroll removed pieces of her flesh from her buttocks and from her thighs. He wrapped them up, took them home, and cooked them for dinner, end quote. Now, here's where the story hurts just that much more. A local man in Rhine named Heinrich Ott was arrested for Tesmer's murder, and he hanged himself while awaiting trial. I'm guessing the public ridicule was too much to bear, and you'll see why I say that later. Heinrich wasn't the only one wrongfully accused and just bombarded with accusations of Kroll's crimes. As his appetite for death and flesh grew, so did his strategy. Kroll would find and murder his victims in different towns scattered across West Germany, hardly ever committing crimes in the same area as to throw off investigators. Furthermore, unlike serial killers at large, Kroll killed women, girls, and even men, switching the victim profile when he felt like it. Quote, "Those who have studied Kroll's psychology note that his self-awareness and methodical ways of selecting victims point to Kroll having a higher IQ than his reported 78, end quote. Now, I won't go into every gory detail about each one of his murders and dismemberments and dinners. That would honestly be too heavy, but I will cover them in brief as according to Wikipedia. So in 1959, on July 26th, in the city park of Essen, Manuela Knott, who was 16, was strangled, raped, and killed, and then slices of her flesh were carved again from her buttocks and her thighs. In April of 1962, Petra Gies, who was 13, was raped and strangled in Dinslaken, Bruckhausen. Another man by the name of Vincenz Kuhn was arrested and convicted for this crime. On June 4th of 1962, Monika Tafel, who was only 12, was killed in Walsum. Slices of her flesh were again carved from her butt. Walter Quicker was arrested for this crime. He was later released, but was driven by his neighbors to suicide. Another human life taken as a result of Kroll's crimes, ridiculed by his neighbors to the point of suicide. On September 3rd of 1962, Barbara Bruder, again 12 years old, was abducted in Burscheid, and her body was never found, but he would later confess to killing her. 3 years later, in August of 1965, Hermann Schmitz, 25, and his girlfriend Marion Veen were attacked as they sat in a car at Lover's Lane. Quote, "That night, Kroll had traveled to Grossenbaum, where he spied Schmitz and his girlfriend or fiancée, Marion Veen, in a secluded area having sex in the front seat of a car, and got an idea. Kroll lured Schmitz out of the car by waving his arms for help, screaming, blah, blah, blah. Then, to his surprise, he stabbed Schmitz repeatedly, planning to kill and rape Veen next. Instead, she leapt into the driver's seat of the car, drove directly at Kroll, who dodged the vehicle and ran away. Although she did get a good look at the man, her account of this nondescript killer didn't turn up any leads, and again, Kroll remained free to carry out his horrifying crimes. In 1966, in September, Ursula Rohling, who was 20, was strangled in Forsterbusch Park near Marl. Her boyfriend, Adolf Schickel, committed suicide after being falsely accused of the crime. Again, these people are just like, oh, it's him. Everybody jump down their effing throats, and then they kill themselves. It's sad. What is that now? 3 or 4 people who are indirectly killed from only being accused of Kroll's crimes? Yeah, 3 suicides. 1 in jail, 1 out of jail, and then this one. Damn. On December 22nd of 1966, Iona Hark, age 5 years old, was raped and drowned in a ditch in Wuppertal. 3 years later, on July 12th, Marina Hetgen, who is 61, was raped and strangled at Hoekswagen. The next year, 1970, on May 21st, Judah Rahn, who is 13, was strangled while walking home from a train station. Peter Shea was arrested and eventually released. He confessed to the crime in 1976 after being hounded by his neighbors. He simply just gave up and was like, fine, I did it. You guys win. In 1976, on May 8th, Karen Topfer, who was 10 years old, again raped and strangled in Voerde, or Voerde, Voerde. His MO for the majority of these crimes was this. He would surprise his victims and strangle them quickly. Afterwards, he would strip the body, have sex with them, often masturbating over it afterwards. He would then mutilate and cut off pieces to be eaten later. Upon returning home, he would have sex again with a rubber sex doll that he had at home for that purpose. Further confusing police in regards to his MO, victim profile, what have you, Kroll did not always strip his victims of flesh to engage in this cannibalism, making each murder a little bit different. He preferred to take these cuts only from the victims that he viewed as particularly young and tender. Before his final kill coming up next, 2 other men, other than the ones I covered, were charged with Kroll's crimes. According to All That's Interesting, Kroll's cannibalistic crime spree came to an end on July 3rd of 1976. That day, he kidnapped 4-year-old Marion Kettner from a park. 4-year-old. A little later, a neighbor had asked Kroll if he knew what was blocking the pipes in the building's shared bathroom. When he replied, "Guts," the neighbor chuckled. Then, he looked in the toilet, saw tiny human organs, and immediately contacted the police. Once inside Kroll's apartment, police found Marion Kettner's dismembered body. Parts of her body were in the refrigerator, a hand was cooking on the stove, and her entrails had clogged the plumbing. Police removed the shared toilet and found, even further, Kettner's liver, lungs, kidneys, and heart. Immediately, Kroll was arrested, admitting to obviously murdering Marion, and gave police details of 13 other murders, including the killings of Irmgard Strell and Clara Frieda Tesmer. He also would confess to this act of cannibalism, of course. Quote, while in prison, Kroll eagerly cooperated with police, convinced that he would be given an operation that would cure his homicidal urges and then be released. I love that. I love that you can just lie to a person like this and they believe it. But after several years in incarceration, he was charged with 8 murders and 1 attempted murder in a trial that went on for, I almost said 151 days. In the end, instead of receiving this life-altering cure that he wanted, Kroll was sentenced to life in prison in April of 1982. End quote. Oh my god, before I forget, the whole reason I called it the Kermit killer, besides the k sounds, is because if you look this guy up, he looks like a human version of Kermit. A German Kermit. A German. One more thing that All That's Interesting pointed out is this. Another disturbing element of Kroll's murders was the motivation behind the cannibalism. Many cannibalistic serial killers, such as Albert Fish, who I'm sure you remember, are sexually motivated to consume their victims' flesh, or see it as a trophy. Kroll apparently had a more practical view of the act. He would later claim that he only took pieces of flesh from his victims because, quote, meat was expensive. And that, my friends, is the story of Joachim Kroll, Germany's most sadistic murderer and a Kermit impersonator. As always, thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me, of all people. I'm sorry, today's was a bit quicker than usual. I promise to have some more meat on the bones next week. If you'd like, stick around for a bonus story and some current updates. What? Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Okay. While researching the previous case, I came across this somewhat wild article relating to cannibalism. and I wanted to share that with you. This is written by Lewis Smith of The Independent, UK. Evidence of mass cannibalism in which even children and unborn babies were on the menu has been uncovered in Germany by archaeologists. Analysis of 7,000-year-old bones dug up at Herxheim, Herxheim, I should have looked up the pronunciation, I'm sorry, in southwest Germany, suggests that the region was a center for cannibalism at the time when the first European farming society may have been collapsing. Marks on bones show that bodies were skinned and had their flesh removed using techniques almost identical to those for butchering animals, and one researcher suggested that some of the victims could have been spit roasted. Many of the bones appear to have been deliberately smashed to allow the living to suck out the marrow of the dead. Others bear the chew marks of teeth, and while they are too indistinct to be certain that scavenging animals are not to blame, the, quote, distinctive distribution speaks strongly in favor of having been made by hungry humans. Cut marks on the bones are often so clear that archaeologists have been able to distinguish between which cuts were intended to skin and scalp the bodies, and which were made to get at the meat. Archaeologists concluded cannibalism was taking place after carrying out a detailed study of bones identified as coming from 6 adults, at least one of them a man, 2 children aged between 6 and 15, and 2 unborn babies. Little booby babies. But with almost 500 other bodies already dug up at this area, and at least as many again still to be recovered, the final number of people eaten by cannibals could be much higher. Researchers suspect that the remains belong to either people eaten in victory celebrations after being killed in wars, or to those slaughtered and consumed as part of ritual sacrifices. They said the sheer number of victims made it unlikely that cannibalism was a last resort during famines. The 10 people whose remains were analyzed for the study are all thought to have died at the same time, and the researchers said, quote, the human bones show abundant and unequivocal evidence of human-induced modifications. Modifications induced by the cutting up of corpses are cut marks and scrape marks, end quote. Once the ribs had been cut away from the spine and the heads were broken open, quote, perhaps to extract the brain, and the tongue cut out before the fleshy parts of the limbs were removed, bones could then be removed and smashed open for the marrow. This is very in-depth for 7,000 years ago. Wow. All of these observations allow us to conclude that the individuals were cannibalized. Quote, the archaeological team concluded in their report published in the journal Antiquity, it is highly probable that a great number of the 1,000 or so individuals probably deposited in Herxheim were subjected to cannibalism, end quote. Dr. Bruno Boulestein, not end quote, sorry, of Bordeaux University, accepted it was impossible to be certain if the flesh was eaten raw or was cooked, but added, quote, we see patterns on the bones of animals indicating that they have been spit roasted. We have seen some of these same patterns on human bones. These remains date from a period when Europe is thought to have been plunged into upheaval, violence, and decline following 500 years in which Neolithic farmers first settled the region. Professor Chris Scarr, a Neolithic expert, it feels like I have a lisp when I say that. A Neolithic expert at the University of Durham said, after learning of the study, that the Herxheim site could represent useful evidence of a society in turmoil, but cautioned that cannibalism can be hard to prove because of other factors, such as funerary rites can leave similar marks on a bone, end quote. Would you eat human flesh in a life or death situation? Killing aside, they're already dead. They bumped their head a bit too hard or something. I don't know if I would. Probably, but I don't know. Oh, as for an update on current events, I don't really have any other than Chatty Daddy Daybell is on day 25 right now of his trial, and we found out that Lori Vallow, his convicted wife, former wife, wife, yeah, used to call his penis, quote, the storm. So that was interesting. My little cousin Jack used to call his penis Jesus, so boom, Chad. Alrighty, that's all I got for you guys today. As always, I appreciate you spending time with me. Truly. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you later. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.